everyone. Welcome, welcome. I think we're going to get started here. Welcome to the speaker series, Harnessing the Power of Story to Level Up Your Marketing. Today's presenter is Evan Cox with Cox Consulting. And then I am going to let Evan tell his own story because I'm sure he tells it a lot better than I do and give you a little information about him. So Evan, go ahead and take it away. Thank you and welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Let me start by saying it's great to meet all of you virtually. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and in the Zoom digital age, I'm going to probably ask, can you see me and hear me okay? So let me just make sure that everything works. Can you see my screen before I hit play? Are we good? I see a couple of thumbs up way back in the room. And can you still see it? I just want to make sure. Awesome. Perfect. So there's three important things that you need to know about me. Number one, I believe that Chiefs football reigns supreme this time of year. I'm in St. Louis, but I'm still a massive Kansas City Chiefs fan. I don't know if I have anybody else that is cheering on the Chiefs, but I told the team earlier, I said, seeing you guys beat Tom Brady was phenomenal. I've got family in Gladstone and Lee Summit. And so I regularly am heading either to Kansas City for football or for family. And the best is when I combine it and do football and family at the same time. So that's the first thing that you need to know about me. Number two, I have either been to, attended, or presented at a number of events like this before. And there's one thing that I cannot stand. And that is when somebody gets up and says, this is going to change everything. All you need to do is this, and the answer to this is hire me. Sure, at some point we might work together and that would be great. But everything that I provide you today, you can do on your own in your business, in your nonprofit, your company, organization, or any of the ventures that you do. And it's going to add tons of value. I really believe that. And step three is the reason we're here today. I believe that good marketing changes everything. For most businesses and nonprofits and organizations, marketing feels a little bit like a black hole, right? You dump money into a Facebook ad and you're like, I don't know if it worked or not. Or you build a website and you think it looks kind of pretty, but you're not sure how to track and see if it actually works. And I believe that when done right, good marketing simply changes everything. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to view it through the lens of harnessing the power of story to level up your marketing. Because the reality is, marketing and story are very similar and work together because story is a sense-making device. Most of the time when I think about stories, what do I think about? Good novels, good books, box office hits at the movie theater, right? I think about the stories, the plot lines, the twists. And the reality is, any good story is going to have 7 key elements. We're going to go over those 7 key elements today. It might, spoiler alert, ruin the idea of going to the movies for you, and that's a casualty of this event. So I'm sorry about that. But what we are going to do is break down how the big box office hit producers are making a movie, or how a big novelist is making a hit that becomes a sensation, and how we use those same principles to market your business or organization effectively. We call it building your story brand or your brand story. And that is going to be the idea that we're espousing today. Is anybody currently, and I can only see some folks, so you have to raise them high. Is anybody currently either in charge of wondering what to do with or curious how to change your marketing? I'm assuming that's probably a large portion of folks. Perfect. The reality is marketing changes regularly. And the best way to do that is have a framework with a controlling idea. So as we get in today, what you're going to see is this idea of building your brand story is really powerful. I call it the power of using a story brand. And I'm actually certified in a process that you can use, and we're going to walk through today. Because the reality is most companies waste an enormous amount of money on marketing. I spoke with an organization recently that just redid their website. And they spent about $7,000 working on this website. They got to the end of it and they realized that it didn't meet their audience that they're trying to reach. The design was kind of clunky in a few spots. It wasn't technically fast, so it wasn't a healthy website. And they said, we feel like we just like flushed a whole bunch of money down the toilet. And that's a common theme that I continue to hear from multiple companies and organizations, no matter where you're located, is that if you're not careful, if you don't use the right approach, it's really easy to waste money fast when it comes to marketing. Next thing I want to show you here is what I would consider a really beautiful landing page on a website. If everybody can see this, it says, your journey starts here. Artesian, innovative solutions, learn more, get started. Like you can see this, and there's a real vibe about it where you're like, okay, that's pretty cool. But my question to anybody in the room today is, what does this company do? Who they are, and what do they sell? And if you were to pause and look at not just this website, but a lot of websites, even the big enterprise companies just pay a lot of money for their site. The reality is sometimes it's really not clear what you offer, who you are, and how that problem is solved with one of your solutions. And that is the hallmark key for us today. The power of story doesn't lie in the ability to have a ton of great motion graphics or a really beautifully designed site. That's a piece maybe of building an effective website or a print piece or any other marketing collateral that you're creating. But the power is creating a story that deposits a problem in the mind of your reader that you know that they deal with, and a solution that you know they're going to want because they resonate with that problem. So people buy products only after they read words that make them want to buy those products. That's why it's really frustrating for me to go back to that previous web page that we talked about, where most marketers or even in-house marketing teams will automatically start with, what do we want it to look like and feel? And here's the imagery and the photos, and all those things are important, but they're the last step of any marketing campaign or project. We want to be words first focused, which means we find out what the controlling idea is, build a message around that, and then you need to write words that resonate with the pain points of your audience. Imagine this. You guys are probably familiar with either one of these three movies, the Star Wars trilogy, the Hunger Games trilogy, or the Bourne series and trilogy. Have you guys seen any of those trilogies before? They're pretty popular, yeah? Well, let me walk you through a plot line here. In the first Bourne movie, what happens within a few minutes? An opening scene happens. You don't know all the details, but you can tell that something big is about to happen. Within a few minutes, Jason Bourne is inside a car, racing down a street, and you're hooked, right? We call that an open story loop. There's a question, a problem that deposits in the mind of the reader or the watcher that says, I need to know what happens. Now let's flip that in reverse and say that same movie opens and it's Jason Bourne visiting a pet store. In fact, he wants to adopt a kitten. Within the first 5 minutes, there's a really cute kitten. He's decided to name it Chuckles. He buys a sweater for it, some boots for it, because every good cat has to have clothing, right? Walks out the door and decides, I'm going to go shopping for the rest of my cat gear before I go hunt down the bad guys. Well, the reality is that any story or movie open like that, we would be either leaving the theater or hitting pause on our streaming device pretty quickly. Because the reality is people only care about what you offer when you position it as a solution to the problem they feel. Feels maybe a little bit rudimentary, maybe a little bit cold, but based on human psychology, we are designed and wired to care about things and focus in on things that are able to solve either a psychological, emotional, and internal problem that we're dealing with. So what does that mean? As human beings, regardless of what we're doing, we're bombarded with at least 3,000 marketing messages every single day. Back in the 1950s, it probably wasn't even close to 100 marketing messages a day, right? But now there's digital, there's advertising, there's billboards on another level, right? You hop on social media, there's advertisements along with all the things that you see while you're scrolling. What does that do for human psychology in the 21st century? It means that we're designed to survive and thrive and conserve calories. So if you walk into a mall and you're bombarded with all of those sensory things that are happening, what do? Eventually, you're not going to smell the Cinnabon shop down the road. That might be the thing that stays with you, but it's the first thing that's probably going to go. And all the flashing billboards, or the person that's cleaning and you can hear the squeak of their cart in the back. Eventually, you're not going to remember that, because what are you designed to do? Remember and focus in on the things that are most important. Survive and thrive. And secondly, conserving calories means you're going to be overwhelmed if you focus on all of those things. When it comes to marketing, what's really important to remember that no matter what kind of company or organization you run, your reader, your key audience, the persona, the people that you want to reach are in the exact same fight for survival in their mind, subconsciously, that you are. And unless you posit a problem and a solution very quickly in your marketing, they're going to move on to a different story. Let me show you an image I think is really illustrative of this idea. If anybody's gone bowling, well, first of all, if you've gone bowling with me, you know that hitting 100 is a really good day. I'm not a good bowler. It's fun, but I'm not a good bowler. But the reality is, every time that you are marketing, consider one more thing that you're giving the reader to remember or act on is like handing them a bowling ball. Let's say that you offer a product and you are in a clothing business. And you say, oh my gosh, these shoes are really awesome because we create them all the time. And you start going in. That's like handing someone a bowling ball, an 8-pound bowling ball, asking them to remember to hold on to it. Now, what happens as your marketing message goes deeper and deeper and deeper? You might say on your flyer, and come to our store at 4:45 on a Saturday afternoon, Central Standard Time, in case you're from out of town. You start adding a second bowling ball, right? It's not just one 8-pound bowling ball. You're actually giving them 2 bowling balls. And the reality is, every single time you ask your reader to remember one more thing that's not connected to the problem that you want to solve, it's giving them another bowling ball. And eventually, at 3 or 4, even the strongest person probably can't hold those bowling balls for very long before they realize this is not worth it, and I'm going out the door. So let's think about your website for a minute, because almost everyone in here either has a website, needs a website, or wants a website, right? And what do most people say when I am working on a website project with a brand new client? Oh, we just changed it, or I want to change it. Everybody feels like this embarrassment about the current status of their website, right? The reality is, on your website, in the very first center of the homepage, if you say innovative artesian solutions, you've just handed them 3 8-pound bowling balls and wrapped it in Vaseline, because they can't remember what that means. They don't know what you offer, and they're moving on to another site. So, what is the theme and the mantra of today? If you confuse, you lose. Clarity wins the day, and story is the ultimate sense-making device. Because the reality is, if I was going to tell you, you need to remember this, and give you 15 different bullet points, by the time that I was done today, even if you were going to win $500, it'd be a really hard sell for you to remember all 15 things in the right order. But what happens if I ask you to finish a jingle that you've heard on the radio or on TV in your local network area for the last 30 years, right? It comes to the surface right away. It's part of a story that's been deposited in your mind, and it's connected, hopefully, with a problem or a solution that they offer. So let me walk you through this framework. It's a messaging framework designed to help you take anything that you do, could be your company at large, an individual product or a service, and filter it through a 7-part process that really offers clarity, consistency, and a message that resonates. So let's start with step 1. Any movie that you watch, let's go back to those 3 I presented to you. The Hunger Games and Star Wars, either it's Katniss Everdeen or Luke Skywalker, tend to be those 2 key characters in both of those stories. And what happens? Opening scene, they're either presented with a challenge, or you get a little bit of backstory so that you can resonate and get a little bit of empathy for where they're at. And they end up becoming the central character in the story, right? For Star Wars, it's become a series that's not just a trilogy, but now there's like 12 plus different programming all around, like individual plot lines and stories. They made a big element out of this one story, right? And for Katniss, there's 3 different movies created out of her storyline to hopefully save her community and her district from the ultimate issue, which was life or death scenario, the Hunger Games, right? But here's the reality. Every single character in every story, and your business and my business included, really cares about three things. They care about, and let me go here, to the problem. And it's not just one problem, it's three problems. There's an external problem, an internal problem, and a philosophical problem. And here's the reality. When I think about a philosophical problem versus an external problem, it may be a little confusing at first, but let's go back to our issue of Luke Skywalker scenario for just a moment in Star Wars. As the central character in that story, he first off had an external problem. He was destined to be a Jedi, and he didn't know how to do it. Didn't know how to use a lightsaber, right? If you've ever watched it, or I just took my kids through the first 4, 5, and 6 episodes in the trilogy about a year ago, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is not going to be the ultimate Jedi, right?" But he goes through a training process to help build those skills. He doesn't know how to be the Jedi. That's an external problem, a thing that he tangibly doesn't have. But internally, the reality is he probably feels frustrated or overwhelmed during his training sessions. He might feel out of his league or like he doesn't have what it takes. And that's a very different set of problems, right? How you feel about your problem or how your customer feels about their problem is very different from the external problem. And philosophically is that last problem. Ultimately, in almost every scenario, there's going to be a good versus evil. And it may not be quite that high level, but let me kind of break this down with a very simple term. This Saturday at my house, we moved into our house not long ago, we have a plumber and a foundation expert coming to our house. Reality is our foundation, when we moved in, had some issues that started to cause some problems. So when we had them come out, most plumbers are never going to start with, "I've got this good versus evil philosophical problem to solve your world," right? But what they are going to say is your toilet's leaking, your foundation is broken, and you need to have a home that you're proud of, or you need to have a foundation that supports your family and your home. There should be some sort of higher motive for what you do because you care about your customers, you care about your clients. Your audience is not just there to be sold to, you're there to serve your audience. So every single person, including Luke Skywalker, has an external, an internal, and a philosophical problem. And here's the key, here's the big thing. Almost every single one of your customers, no matter what industry you're in, is going to search you out, find you, and decide that they want to be interested in your services and products because of an external problem. So going back to that plumber and that foundation expert for me, I searched on the web, right? Foundation experts near me. I looked for some referrals and I asked folks, who do you know? So I went to them with an external problem that I couldn't fix on my own. But I made a choice between 3 different vendors based off how they make me feel. And the same is true for your customers in marketing. You need to position yourself as the problem solver for their external problem. They need to look good in their next outfit. They need to have their home repaired. I just spoke with one of your colleagues who's in the medical profession. So you want them to feel good, but they're going to make a choice to do business or not do business with you based on how you make them feel. And that is the crux of our story. So as we keep moving on, I want to make sure that we're mindful that there's 7 individual steps like we talked about. Our character is going on a journey. And in fact, does anybody have young kids in here? Again, it's really hard. So I'm going to envision you all as really young, really smart, and really beautiful, because I'm sure that you guys all are. I can't see everybody, but does anybody have young kids or grandkids? Okay, I see a few hands. The most widely spread phenomenon in our household when it comes to the movies is a series on Disney Plus called Bluey. I don't know if anybody's seen Bluey or heard of Bluey. The theme music is on repeat in my mind 24/7. But aside from that, when it comes to Bluey, even they're using this idea of a story sense-making device and talking about a hero's journey. Lots of books may have covered this topic for you in the past, but when we're on this hero's journey, what I want to make sure is clear is we start with a character, your customer. They're introducing three problems into the equation that you're there to solve. But it's not until act 3 of the story that they meet you, a guide. And I want to make sure that I'm going to the slide here, right? To meet you as their guide. Reality is most of your competitors, most of your people in a similar space or people that you're vying for attention against end up starting off with me on accident. It's never on purpose, but how many times have you been in an elevator pitch scenario? You ask somebody what they do, and their answer is, well, my grandfather started the company about 75 years ago. And within 3 seconds, you're immediately checked out, right? And instead, what would it look like for you to deposit a story a little bit farther down the road than instead of starting with you, you're actually starting with your customer? Because the reality is this storyline that we're talking about only works if it's about your character, if it's about your target audience, if it's about your customer. This story doesn't matter if it's about you. So sure, on your about page, you may want to talk about a couple of things that are really important to know, but it needs to be positioned in a way that speaks to their needs and not just talking about you. Because the reality is, if you accidentally slip into talking about yourself and your business, they're going to say, that's fantastic in a moment, in a split instant. And they're going to say, I'm going on a different journey. They've got their own story. I'm going to find someone else who can help me with mine. So the third act of any story is talking about meeting a guide, and you as the guide are helping the character in any journey. Go back to Hunger Games and Star Wars just for a second with me. In the Hunger Games, it's Haymitch who's helping Katniss because he's been there and done it before. He actually survived the Hunger Games. And in Luke's case, it was actually Yoda, right? Our character who you didn't know a whole lot about until we ended up with the more recent series, where everybody's like got the baby Yodas. Like I've got a neighbor who's got the baby Yoda with a whole, holding a pumpkin outside for Halloween. Like before that, you didn't know any of Yoda's story. And the reality was he was the person helping to train Luke to become a Jedi. And here's the sad, unfortunate, but exciting reality for you and for me. When it comes to a story, your role is pretty limited in their story. It feels a little bit sad that you've built a business or you run a company or you do all these things and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't get to really focus on me at all, right? It should be a little bit different, but the reality is psychology works this way. You have one job: get your character and your customer from point A to point B. You want to get them from somewhere where they need help to somewhere where they've gotten help because of you. Your role as a guide, if you think about story, is static. You are consistent. You're a plumber. You're a medical professional. You are a radio host. Whatever your industry and your field is, you've got the chops to get the job done, and that's all the customer needs to know. You're a static character in the story who never changes. Your customer starts with a problem and they're doing this, they're the focal point, but think about it. Every character in a story, Luke and Katniss included, have highs and lows, and they hate what they're doing and then they love it and they feel all these things, right? You're not trusted and dependable in the eyes of your customer when you're dynamic and moving. The consistent guide is the one who wins the day. And in this framework, you position them as the hero and you as the guide to walk them through a process to get to the promised land. I know we're moving pretty fast here, but I want to walk through a few more things for us. Your customer is the hero of the story, not your brand. And here's the other problem when it comes to story. And this is where a lot of movies get it wrong. There may be a problem, it may be compelling, you might be interested, but if halfway through the movie you're not sure where it's going and the plot line is stalled, the reality is there's probably not a plan to win back the girl. There's probably not a plan to defeat the dragon. There's probably not a plan to bring down the Death Star. The reality is the best brands, the best companies, the best leaders decide that your story is going to serve your audience, not you first. And it's going to give them a clear and concise plan to get from problem to solution. And here's where it might be easy to get tripped up. Doesn't mean that your plan is super simple if you're a naval engineer, right? It's probably pretty complex what you do, but the most successful companies take really complex ideas and turn them into simple, solvable solutions. So for you, your plan might be schedule a consultation. We'll get you a plan and you'll see results. And you can expand on that. That's pretty evergreen. It's not super elaborate, but behind the scenes, there may be 50 steps for you to get from scheduling a call to invoice to proposal to do the work to testimonial. But your customer, we're talking about marketing here, doesn't want to know any of that. They only need to know exactly what they need to know to make a next decision. It's kind of like in Frozen, if your kids or grandkids have ever watched Frozen, where they talk about just doing the next right thing. In marketing, what we want our customer, our client to do is simply choose the next right action. You found a problem? Great, I have a solution. You're interested? Let me offer you a free demo. Let me give you a 14-day trial. Let me get on a call and answer your question or give you a free quote. Ask them to take micro commitments because the reality is we're all risk averse. And what happens when your alma mater shows up on the phone and says, I want to talk to you a few minutes about our updating fundraising campaign. Unless you really love your alma mater or you really care and you know the person you're talking to, the first thing you're probably trying to think of is, how can I get out of this conversation? They're not listening to the recording, my alma mater is not, but how do I get out of this conversation, right? The reality is give them a 3 or a 4-step plan that walks them through. You've got a problem, I've got a solution, here's what it looks like when we're done. Now, when we talk about this process, I want to go to step 5 real quick here. You need to call your audience to action. And on your website is an example. If you don't have any CTA buttons or really clear language that says, schedule a call today, or in your email campaign, if you say, learn more, and you don't give a whole lot of detail, it's almost like saying, I've got a problem, or you've got a problem, I've got a solution, I want you to take action, and then not giving them a cash register to actually hand over the money. Like there's no mechanism for them to get started. The best stories culminate in this ultimate call to action. So what happens for Katniss? She has to volunteer, right, to become the equivalent of the Hunger Games like entry for her district. Or for Luke, what does he have to do? He has to decide, I'm going to go out on my own and defeat the Death Star with the help of my comrades, right? So the reality is your story is designed by nature and psychology to take someone from a problem, evoke that into a solution that you can solve for them, and then call them to take action. And most folks, whether you're in the nonprofit or the for-profit sector, start to get a little squirrely here because that internal either imposter syndrome or psychology says, well, if they want it, that's great, but I don't want to push it on them. The reality is, if we go back to those first few slides, 3,000 marketing messages a day, super busy, need a problem and a solution pretty quick, folks are just too busy. And if you don't consistently remind them of the next right thing you want them to do, they're not going to take action, and they will with someone who is doing that. So where does this go for us? Step 6 and step 7 are the ultimate dichotomy of any story, right? If it's a tragedy, what typically happens? There's some ultimate lesson we can learn from it, but it results in failure, right? I think about some of the storylines that I have watched with my wife. Maybe some of them might be the Christmas Hallmark movies or some of the rom-coms where, like, if things end in tragedy, you're kind of left wanting for more. But what does everyone, my wife included, love the most? The ones where the guy gets the girl, or there's ultimate resolution, or the family's back together and everyone's happy, or Katniss wins the day and the Death Star is defeated in Star Wars. The reality is, the only reason you call someone to action because you want to point them toward success and away from failure. So what does this look like if you're creating your brand story? It means if you're a plumber, I don't know why I keep going back to this reference point of a plumber, but here we are. If you're a plumber, it means success is your toilet's no longer broken, your pipes are no longer leaking, you have peace of mind, you're addressing all those problems. And when you're helping them avoid failure, it means you're never going to wonder when the next thing is going to break. I'm always going to be on speed dial. Or failure might be you're still stuck with that sinking pit in your stomach that says, I think the duct tape is not going to hold it together and it's going to break again, right? So for your solution, your service, your product. Key here, find something that they can take action on and remind them what's at stake. When it comes to success, my goodness, life is going to be different after we're done. When it comes to failure, these are the things that you want to avoid, which is why you should take action today. So here's what we want to do. I want to make sure that this is a filtering framework for all of your marketing. You could be working on print ads and doing advertisements and mailing campaigns. That's great. You could be working on your website or digital campaign, or you could simply be saying, I don't have any of that and I want to start somewhere, or what I have is broken and it's not working. I guarantee you the results you're getting are going to only increase for the better if you position your reader as someone who is a central character in the story, and you position yourself, your brand, your company as a guide to get them to the promised land. The favorite storylines, the favorite books and movies that we all love and enjoy are doing it because it works, and human psychology is powerful. Story is a sense-making device, and we need to harness that for good, not for bad. You may see some marketing examples that feel kind of sleazy and slimy. And the reality is there are some folks out there who use marketing for bad. But the reality is I define marketing as simply an avenue to create and build new relationships. Now, sure, you're asking them to take action, but what is marketing? It's helping people find you because you know that you can solve something that's really bugging them. You can be the ultimate guide that takes them from point A to point B, and that is a really powerful thing. Now, let me walk you through a couple of things here. I'm going to actually go through this a little faster so that you can see this. But again, I want to remember, what do our customers want? What are their problems? Have you positioned yourself as the hero? Is there a clear plan to let them win the day, not you? Are your calls to action clear? And have you helped them imagine what life could look like differently with you and what's at stake if they don't take action? So here's a couple examples. There's actually a free tool that I'll show you at the end on my website that you can access for free and use this on your own. But here's what it might look like, right? You fill in your character. You might talk about your problem. You give them a guide with empathy and authority, and you walk them through this plan. Now, what I do want to just pause and speak to for a minute, and again, I did speak with one of your colleagues in the medical profession, so I'll use a medical example. What happens if you go to a doctor and you've got a broken leg? You're in the ER, you're in urgent care, you're wherever you found yourself. You are with that doctor sitting down, and they say, oh my gosh, that must really hurt. I'm really sorry that happened. You know, I've seen this a dozen different times, and every single time I wince in pain because, my gosh, your bone is sticking out of your leg, and oh gosh, that's painful. I can't help you, but man, that must feel bad. You're never going back to that doctor, right? That's not somebody that you're going to say, I trust them to fix my leg so I can walk again. On the opposite end, you don't love going to a doctor who walks straight in the door, says, you've got a broken leg, I can fix it, sets it with no painkillers, and you're on your way, right? The bedside manner is terrible. They've introduced authority, which are the two things in that guide section that we're talking about. But you as the guide need to find the appropriate balance of empathy and authority in your marketing message. I was just writing a landing page and a homepage for a client this morning before our workshop. While I was walking through what they were doing, it was for a local bank. And as we were processing through it, I was like, you know what is really frustrating about working with a local bank is that it feels like all of the things on the website are geared for only one kind of person. It might be geared for the person who is going to start using the bank, but it's hardly ever geared for the person that like wants immediate support and wants access to all the resources, at least in my case. And so I was like, okay, how can we use some empathy to acknowledge what they felt or acknowledge the pain point? We make sure we're speaking to both of those audiences. And with authority, we can say, in this case, the bank has been around since 1873. I said, our authority probably needs to lean on the fact that they've been around since the founding of the Yellowstone National Park, right? They've been around since Jesse James was initially doing his first bank robbery, and they've survived the day and they're still serving customers. That is the ultimate blend of empathy and authority. So, what does that look like for you? Give them just enough dash of authority to prove that you got the chops to get the job done for them. Your certifications, your ratings, your Google business reviews, maybe a certification and training that you recently went to, and enough empathy to say, we believe that you should have this problem fixed. We understand how frustrating it is, and we are here to walk you through the process. So at this juncture, what I would love to do is I want to show you a couple examples. They're actually before and after examples of a couple of websites that I've worked with to show you what this practically can look like on the homepage opening hero section of a website. Might provide some inspiration because oftentimes people will be nodding in agreement when I'm halfway through this and they're like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what to do. So here's a couple examples. Number one, this is for a local home exteriors company that does roofing, siding, a couple different products. And what do they really want to do? They said, okay, we believe in the power of creating a story. We want to do that. And so they started writing some content on their existing site. We make hiring a contractor an easy process. How can we be of help? So they started to invoke this idea. And they said, we're about halfway through and we need some help taking it all the way home, because this was on their about page. You can clearly see that there's a lot of white there and it's not super compelling on the design. So how can we make like our brand story and message like resonate in the right way and right spot? So here's what we did. We said, you need beautiful roofs and exteriors that stand the test of times. And we said, we're a full service roofing contractor serving homeowners in St. Louis on both sides of the river for all your home exterior needs. We don't address all 7 steps and elements of the story in one single spot on the homepage, but what we do is we have a captivating statement that is clear and compelling that says, okay, I know where they're at, I know what they do, and there's a video playing in the background so they can see it work, like what they do. And then as you scroll down the page, you can actually start to see we've got some empathy. They're positioning their products as something to help serve a problem and offer a solution. So what do we want to do? We want to make sure that you start with a story that's clear, compelling, and solves a problem. And then on a website, for example, how do we take our visuals, your color, your logo, your standards, maybe your photography that you've collected for the last decade, and turn that content into a compelling site? So here's an example of that. Let me show you another example. This is for a local nonprofit here in St. Louis. They serve refugees and immigrants. They provide marquee services for folks who first arrive in St. Louis with nothing. They don't have any resources, any tools, any available assistance. And they come alongside them and get them set up here in the St. Louis community. So they said, our controlling idea, our message is we want to help refugees. We love refugees. We want to serve them. I said, that's great. But what we need to do now is make sure that we update your website with clear, compelling story and message and design that brings it all to life. Because if you can see over here in the top right-hand corner, it says make a difference, donate now. And the button is really big. So like this is the previous version of the site. And it was really hard to interact. And so, yes, they did have a CTA button that gave a next step, but it was hard to navigate. When you clicked on it, it didn't always work. And that was like saying our cash register is faulty. It's there, but it's locked and you can't get to it. So you can't donate to this incredible nonprofit. So what we did is say, okay, what is your key message? Their key message, their controlling idea, their story is we help refugees resettle and thrive. There's some elements of this that as you get farther down the page, you invoke the rest of the story. But again, it's clear and compelling with the words that you use, because that's what people care about most. And the backdrop of a photo that shows a family that has clearly gone from, I don't know what I need, I just need some help, to we're thriving in a new place. And we're grateful that Oasis was able to help us do it all. And then secondly, as a nonprofit example, you can see that we're using two dueling calls to action: get help and donate. So it doesn't mean that you can't ever have more than one call to action, even for a for-profit, but it needs to be really, really clear. So green is donate, get help is blue, and get help goes to a refugee landing page, and donate is for a volunteer or a donor who wants to get involved and serve the community. So there's lots of opportunity for you to take a story and create a compelling message and then turn that into marketing that will change everything. Because the reality is, when you position anybody, a donor, a volunteer, someone who needs help, or even your local client base and customer base, they're going to want to take action when they realize that you are the guide to get them from starting point to the promised land. So as we kind of wrap up here today, I wanted to give you a couple of simple next steps. Number one, let me make sure it's up here. It's loading. There we go. I have 4 free resources on my website, evancoxconsulting.com/resources. We can make sure that that is sent out to you guys afterwards if you like, but there's 4 different resources on there. There's a checklist for you to audit the profitability of your marketing. There is a sales funnel guide, which is essentially how do we create either sales or customers on autopilot. And there's one for a nonprofit or a church, and one for a for-profit entity. There's also a free audit that if you select a few different pieces of information, I will go in and audit your website, your marketing communications, and you get a chance to be interactive in rating your own marketing as well. So we'll get a chance for you to say, okay, here's everything that I've got. Here's how I think it's performing, but I need some extra help. And that's all on my resources page. So I can offer a free audit where there's no charge, it's complimentary, and it just gives you the ability to say, okay, maybe I feel really good about the story I'm telling, but my website is suffering. Or I love the look of my website, but I need to maybe change how we're positioning it or some of the things that we're saying. So I want to make sure that that is something that's available to everyone. Step 2 is you can actually create your own brand story using the template that I've shown you. At my website again, /resources, there's an opportunity to create what I call a brand script. It's that screenshot that I showed you where it shows all the 7 elements that you can input. You can create a free account. You can go in and create your own brand story. And then I would love for you to send it to me afterwards so that I can see exactly what it looks like. And step 3, no matter what your story becomes, if it has all those 7 components, the worst possible thing you can do is create it and then set it off to the side. The best thing you can do is create a brand story that's compelling and then plaster it everywhere. Figure out what do we need to do internally with our team for everybody to get on board. Do we need to have an internal meeting and collaborate about this? Do we need to start using it on our website in a new way? The reality is none of this makes sense for your reader unless you take action on it and start using it in all your marketing. So I'm convinced that when you position your customer as the person who needs service and is in need of service for a specific problem, and you're the guide who walks them from start to finish on solving that problem, you become immensely more valuable in the eyes of your audience customer or client, and it enables you to serve them better and boost your bottom line. So I'm so grateful for our time together today. And remember, the ultimate thing here is if you confuse on your story, you'll lose. So I'm so grateful that we had a chance to kind of walk through that together. I know it's a lot of information, but what I want to do now is open it up to Q&A. I know that there were some instructions on using the microphones, and it won't be one of those awkward scenarios that we'll sit here for 10 minutes. If you don't have questions, we won't hold you hostage. But if you have questions about your specific context, let's chat through it. I would love to be able to hear not only who you are and what you do, but what your questions are so we can get you moving in the right direction.
Does anyone have any questions for Evan? If you do, please raise your hand and turn your mic on. No questions, really?
Awesome. Everybody's a rock star. All their marketing is working.
A question. Go ahead.
Hi, Evan. Appreciate the presentation. Very thought-provoking. I'm curious your thoughts on the landing page and either having like video to engage and to click on, or a lot of sites have a carousel of pictures that rotate, and just kind of your feeling about the approach on the landing page.
That's a good question. Also, I didn't catch your name. What was your name, sir?
Sorry, I'm Eric Wilson. I'm with a nonprofit volunteer education foundation, Florida Sage Education Foundation. So we raise money
Awesome.
to schools, the school district.
Awesome. Well, Eric, first of all, thank you for being here and for what you do. I think that's incredible. So your question, if I could summarize, was on a website or landing page of any kind, what role does video play, or like rotating sliders? Like, what value does that offer to the reader? Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, I saw the thumbs up. So two initial things come to mind. Sliders used to be an incredible way to get multiple messages out there about 5 to 10 years ago. Because people were not used to scrolling, especially if you're on a mobile device and just scrolling here. And many times those scrolling images are not going to move fast enough. They might not load properly. And the key things that you want to relate on those are not going to effectively get in front of your reader before they're scrolling on. Most of the time, I think readers are pausing just for a moment before they're going to look for what they can find. My recommendation is to move away from those unless you've got a strategic reason to do so. Sometimes I might use a scrolling image farther down the page if I want to relay multiple testimonials, where you can see like a little dot, and then you can see, instead of making like 6 testimonials take up this much space, you can clearly see that I can swipe through them. But most of the time, if it's a swapping video or swapping graphic at the top, people won't stay there long enough to use it. Secondly, I love using the power of video. If it's compelling, if it speaks again to your audience's need and puts them as the hero and you're the guide, that's even better. The key thing to think through is, if I put video on my website, how am I doing so in a way that doesn't make my website load really slow? If you embed it directly on your website, sometimes that'll slow down the loading speed and folks won't stay long enough to view it. So as long as you're doing that effectively, I think video is a fantastic medium to tell your story. Does that help?
I have a question.
Yep, that was great. Thank you.
I have a question kind of.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Danielle Dupree. I'm an executive director of a nonprofit business incubator. And it's been a few years, but the last time I did like an SEO training, especially like on the Google platform, I mean, I was told that if you had rotating photos, that you'd go up higher in search, Google searches. Is that not the case as much now?
That's a great question. Something like SEO changes on a regular basis. So I'm not going to use the "it depends" answer, although sometimes it does depend. But here's, I think, what really matters. SEO by itself can be a powerful tool, but it can take you off track if you're not careful. And here's what I mean by that. SEO is showing what the highest ranked search terms are, right? Allows you to start hopefully ranking for some of those terms. But if you're not positioning any of those terms in light of the story, in light of something that matters to your audience, it can easily become either keyword stuffing, or you can have something that ranks really well that doesn't convert well because people don't care about it and don't understand what the change is. Now, when it comes to SEO, what I do recommend is meta descriptions and site speed, and working on the technical end of those things. Keywords are absolutely essential. If you're like, oh my gosh, we want to rank for a certain industry or a certain vertical, I think those things are great. But it's always the balance between those two. And to your specific question, almost every report I'm reading is say move away from those graphic sliders. I'm not sure why that training recommended them initially, but I can almost guarantee you that any of those that are currently present are going to be hurting you more than helping you in this current environment. Awesome. I saw your head nodding. And thank you again for the work you do. running a business is a phenomenal endeavor. I love it, but it often feels like a roller coaster ride, right? On Monday, you feel like it's awesome. And on Tuesday, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And so anybody who walks through that process is going to feel some version of that story. And it sounds like you guys are able to help walk and navigate them through that.
Any more questions for Evan?
Yeah, any more questions?
Thank you, Evan. Thank you so much for being here. It's a great presentation. I think we all took a lot of great information, and hopefully we can go back and use it, and appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. And if anybody is like me, one of two things is usually going to happen after this presentation. You're going to say, oh, I wish I would have asked this and I just forgot about it. Or you're going to say, I don't really love speaking up in front of everybody. Is there a way that I can ask it a different way? So at any point, if you want to, I am more than happy to field additional follow-up questions. You can reach me at evan@evancoxconsulting.com, or you can just check out my website. And either way, if I can be of any assistance and service, I would love to. I love what you guys are doing, and I'm happy to play a small part.
I'm sorry, I actually did just have a question pop into my mind. How
Awesome.
often do you feel like a company just for their brand should be refreshing their website?
That is a great question. Philosophically, I view a website the same as an employee. The benefit to your website is they don't require health insurance and they don't require a regular paycheck. But what you do want to do is make sure that you're never stopping, always on 24/7 employee, aka your website, is updated and able to serve your customers the best way that it can. So in an ideal environment, you are regularly updating your website, maybe with fresh blog content, doing customer research and figuring out that we need to kind of pivot how we're positioning one of our products and services. So in an ideal world, your website is something that's easy to update, or you've got a partner to help you do it. And you're making routine updates every month to every quarter, depending on how big those are. And then most of my clients are saying every 5 to 7 years, they need to update their website overhaul just to make sure that it's either matching like current digital trends, or oftentimes most of my clients make some sort of pivot, right? They used to operate a petting zoo, now they're an electrical engineer, and so like my website doesn't work anymore. So they need to make sure that it like fits the current context of their business. So I would say if you get a website that can operate for 5 years without major changes outside of content, I think you're in a really good spot.
We appreciate it, Evan, and thank you again. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Look forward to hearing from you guys soon.
Yep. Thank you.